presented by Ram, starts now.
All losses really hurt, but you have some that really leave a deep scar, and this is definitely one of those. This one is hurting about as bad as any I can think of.
Well, that was head coach Lovie Smith minutes after that debacle in Washington yesterday. A game the Buccaneers should have won, but they choked. Someone has to be accountable for losing a 24-0 lead, and I think you just saw him. Welcome to this week's edition of The Plank, presented by Ram. I'm Tom Corrin. And I'm John Sable. The show is streaming exclusively on our free ABC Action News app and on abcactionnews.com. This is how you guys can get in touch with us using Twitter and joining the conversation using the hashtag #ThePlank. You can also tweet Tom and I with our Twitter handles here at TCornWFTS and at John_Sable, or you can give us a call. We want to hear from you guys, the fans, after yesterday's epic collapse in Landover, Maryland. 813-878-2888. So right now, it's time for our Plank Report presented by Ram with Tampa Bay Times Buccaneers beat writer Greg Allman. I know you chatted with Greg just a little bit ago, TK. Yeah, Greg is on a plane right now on his way back from D.C., but I did catch up with him earlier today, and we went over that debacle in Washington yesterday. Here it is.
Greg, I don't know about you, but I'm sure, there's thousands of Buccaneer fans in a state of shock this morning after that 31-30 loss to Washington. Your general takeaway from that game yesterday?
Oh, yeah. I don't think you can imagine the Bucs being more in control or everything clicking than they were when it was 24-0 in the second quarter. And even in the second quarter, to let them back at 24-7, 17-point lead at the half, things clicking as well as they were on offense. It was hard to imagine a scenario where things could go as badly as they were. But, offense stopped scoring points, started settling for field goals, and the defense, let Washington score on every second-half drive, and that's a recipe for failure.
I have to cut the offense some slack there in that second half. Vincent was out. They had two receivers left, one which they never saw a day of light of a football field, and they still managed to put a few points on the board. To me, I think the onus is totally on this defense, and I think the onus is on Lovie Smith and the play calling that he makes for that defense.
Yeah, with the single exception of them being on the 1-yard line with a chance to put the game away and not being able to get that 1 yard, everything else you have to put on the defense. Yeah, even if you take away all the points they give up in the third quarter, you still had a situation where all they had to do is not give up a touchdown in the final 2 minutes, and they couldn't do that. So, yeah, it's definitely on them, and I don't think anyone on the defense is arguing that at this point.
I look at this team, and it clearly is one that, for some reason, has a lack of finish. It is a defense that is made up of mostly veterans. It's a defense that's made up of former Chicago Bears players that Lovie brought in so that they could play the Tampa 2. And this defense is not performing at all. To me, I think he's on notice. What do you feel?
Yeah, again, I don't know that there's a real threat to him losing his job in season. But yesterday is the kind of game where, I don't think of the Glazers as being insulted people. But, think about how happy they probably were in the first half, if not at halftime. And then to have a flight home with a loss, that's just hard to imagine. And I think a big part of that is on coaching and execution of a scheme or lack of execution of the scheme. So, no, I think he's known all along that they have to take a step forward. I don't think we thought going into the season that the offense would be so much stronger the better half of this team. The defense has been a liability now. Gerald McCoy, didn't have a play in the second half, didn't have a tackle, didn't log anything in the second half. The secondary we've talked about ad nauseum now in terms of the lack of plays and picks, especially by the cornerbacks in the group.
Unfortunately, we should be talking about a Buccaneer team that's 3-3, but now they're 2-4, and now they got to go to Atlanta, and that ought to be a lot of fun.
We know how that went last year. Yeah, it'll be a fun week.
Well, that was Greg Allman joining me earlier today. Listen.
So much to digest.
It's really hard for me to hold this back, but Lovie, you are on notice, okay? If I am the owner, right now, you are in my office already, okay? Number two is I want to know what was going on defensively. I want to know what the problems were. I want to know, what your coaches are doing, and I want to know how come you can't make adjustments at halftime. How come these guys come out and play so flat after a 24-0 lead? They got the game. They got no killer instinct. They got nothing. They take no prisoners. They give them up. This team is a bad team. It is a bad team, all right? And until you get these guys' heads right, and until you get these guys performing, I'm telling you, you're close. You're close. You've got one foot in, and that other foot is kicking that door.
Yeah,
right
that seat's getting a little hotter. And, you know, the bigger thing, I think, look at this. You had 2 weeks to prepare for this game. 2 weeks. And you can judge a team in the NFL based sometimes on how they perform after the bye week. And you had all that momentum from the Jaguars game. You brought a little bit of that momentum in the first half. And then you're right, TK, they came out flat. This was 2 different teams, 2 different defenses that came out in the second half and pretty much laid an egg, getting outscored, what, 24-6 in the second half?
Yeah, well, the thing that bothers me is that I heard Lovie say this in his press conference after the game. He said, well, you know, we got down there, and, yeah, okay, it would have been awesome if they would have scored that touchdown, locked down the game. Even Gruden said that after the game. He said, we'd be toast. The fact is they didn't. The fact is they haven't hardly done that all season. The fact is the defense has blown every chance that they have had to save a game this season.
And
that's twice now.
And you have to wonder, TK, where is this leaving Leslie Frazier and Lovie Smith? Are they not on the same page?
Well, I don't know what the hell Leslie Frazier's doing.
What are they doing?
What is Leslie doing?
He
Is he devising the game plan?
Right.
Lovie's making the calls. And the reason why I'm on you, Lovie, it's not because you're the head coach. It's because you are the acting defensive coordinator making the calls. And you know what? When you get down to that final 5 minutes of the game and you get into that prevent defense with this Tampa 2, that is death. That has got to stop. All right, that has got to stop. You've got to take chances. You've got to put pressure on because you have no pressure, you have no corners, you got no chance.
Yeah.
And that's what you've got right now.
This team is supposed to be known for their defense, and they just have not been able to step up. And we have a caller on the line, Jim from Newport Richie. And, you know, Jim, you call every week venting in maybe the last few weeks, happy they win. I can just have a little feeling that you're just a little upset today.
A little bit's understatement, guys. You know, to blow it like they did is just unexcusable. My big concern is Doug Martin runs for 130-plus yards. I know he's not the fastest guy in the world. He probably should have scored on that big run, but he didn't. But then why take him out? He's good for at least pounding it for 2-3 yards at a pop.
Yeah.
And you bring in Sims trying to run him around the end, and he gets squashed for a loss of 2. What are they thinking?
And, you know, Doug Martin was asked after the game, you know, why were you taken out? Did you feel like you could play on that play because they kept feeding them the ball on that drive, especially when they got down there in the first and goal? And he didn't know why they pulled them out. He said, I don't know if the coaches thought I was tired or what. I don't know if that is maybe Dirk Cutter overthinking maybe what to call in that situation. Do they maybe give it to Sims on the outside? But you know what? Doug Martin was running free and really played extremely well, and why not just continue to feed him the rock even though maybe the first 2 plays in that drive he got stuffed? That was the worst call or play call by the Buccaneers all game, which, you know what, think about this. If they score that touchdown, they pad out that game, and they win.
Well, frankly, I didn't like the play calls at all. I didn't like the fact that they ran the ball. I would have rather seen them try to do something. You know what the problem they had? How many passes did they make to the tight ends yesterday? 3, right? They made 3. Stocker had 2 receptions, and Braid had 1, I believe it was. Yeah. You know what they had those guys in for? Blocking. All right? Evidently, they had to leave him in there for blocking purposes. And that's a perfect situation where you could drag a tight end around and he can make it open. Or, you know, at late stage of that game, you did not have Vincent Jackson in that game along with Mike Evans. And a fade route wasn't going to work because there's only one guy you're going to the fade route.
You didn't have Lewis Murphy either. And, you know, this game, you can't put the fault on the offense because Jameis Winston actually played fairly well. 21 of 29, no interceptions, no turnovers at all. Why not utilize the tight ends more? Good point. I completely agree. You know, the first half, though, I think what they were thinking, you look at that running game of Charles Sims and Doug Martin rushing combined over 100 yards heading into halftime. But then why would you continue to try to do that if it wasn't working in the third quarter? You have to switch up the play calls and try to get the passing game back, you know, continuing to go. And it just didn't work, and it didn't happen. When you look, TK, at the last maybe, I don't know, last few plays of that drive, I don't know. I don't think they passed the ball once on that drive in there with that big run to Doug Martin.
Right, and You know, that's great. Doug had 164 yards, I believe. Or what do you have?
And Jim, thank you for the call, by the way.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. 130-some yards. You know, Frank, I don't care what the hell he's got. I don't care if he's got 136, 236, 300. I don't care.
Yeah.
What I care about is what the final score is in that final tally. Okay, that's all that matters. The Washington Redskins, you want a stat? They rushed for 50 yards, folks. 50 yards and still won the game.
Yeah. Okay. We outrushed them 190 to 50 yards. But that, when you look at the stat sheet, wasn't the biggest glaring stat of the entire day. You know what it was?
It was penalties.
Penalties. Buccaneers had 16 penalties for 142 yards. That is just unacceptable. And in fact, that's the second most penalties in a game in Buccaneer history, the most ever for a team coached under Lovie Smith. That's including when he was with the Bears. After the game, Lovie Smith and William Golston talked about it. William Golston was flagged for 2 penalties. Here's what they had to say.
It's not the type of ball that we should be playing, that we played. We had, you know, trouble with penalties early in the season, but I thought we had gone past that, but we haven't. We had too many penalties, and that's, you know, some of the penalties really got them going a little bit when we had our big lead.
Yeah, but I did have 3 penalties. Like I said, you can't play in this defense with penalties. You can't win with penalties. That's giving them yards, giving them the extra play.
And then there were the Rays.
I don't think the Rays would have had that many penalties.
No, and they've gone fishing. And
yeah.
Sometimes I think this Buccaneer defense has, too.
And when you look at the stats, I mean, both quarterbacks played well, but really the penalties killed the Buccaneers yesterday. And I stand corrected. Golston had 3 penalties. 2 of them were personnel foul penalties, equating to 30 yards. That's just unacceptable. You got to think about this. When you look at teams that come up with mental mistakes like penalties like this, it comes down to coaching. It comes down to focus. It comes down to game planning. You had 2 weeks for this game to plan for and prepare for, and you clearly lose your focus and you do not come up with any big plays, and you cost your team yards, and for this point, cost your team a game.
Well, you know, their big numbers sitting right there. Winston with a great quarterback rating day. Evans had a great day. But then again, it's all down, can you finish?
Yeah.
You know, can you finish? And they are unable to finish. That's just it's the bottom line. And it comes down to, the players wanting to finish, having the capabilities to finish, having the talent to finish, and the coaches setting them up to succeed and not to fail. And once again, I'm going to bring up that defense, that cover 2 defense, or whatever you want to call it. Bottom line, that cover 2 defense does not work late in the game. And if you were listening or viewing my tweets yesterday, I said it went all the way back to 2 weeks ago against Jacksonville when Bortles hit that long touchdown pass at late in the game that closed it to within 6, I believe it was, or 7.
Yeah.
Yeah, 7. All right? So, folks, they just don't have the right defense, and the right players are in that defense to be able to stop anybody. And Washington knew about it. Washington utilized it in that second half, and they exposed them.
Yeah, and you look at Gerald McCoy, when it comes to the line, 2 tackles the entire game. That's not what you expect from one of your top players in the team. You can argue, well, maybe his shoulder's bothering him. You know, probably is. He won't admit that. But you look at that secondary, exposed. Tim Jennings was a healthy scratch yesterday. He didn't play.
Which he should have been.
Which he should have been.
Then Mike Jenkins, I mean, he gave it up, too.
Yeah.
He did not have a good game either.
Nope.
I'd be interested to hear what Lovie's got to say later today when he meets the gauntlet. But we'll see. We'll see what he says. But as far as I'm concerned, if I'm the owner of that football team, he's on notice. Okay? One more, done. That's it. This is the way it goes. We're going to have more here on The Plank coming up in just a minute, presented by Ram. So hang in there. You want to give us a call? It's 813-878-2888. Like to hear from you. We'll be right back.